You're up.
Good. Well, it's nice to be here with you all today. That's for one thing. My intention was to look at what everybody's doing and to think about one of the issues that comes up, because everybody's making very different kinds of machinery. And I wanted to look at roll film in particular, because the very first non-35 mil photography I did was making a little wooden box and using some sheet film and some Polaroid. But then I moved it towards large format, and between large format and 35 mil, and yet wanting to experiment quite a lot with Pinhole, I moved naturally enough, I think, towards 120 film. So I was looking into different ways of using 120 roll film. And I actually started, or this wasn't the very first, but it's the only one I have at the moment from those days. It's a cheap consumer 120 film camera, 6x6. And the great thing about this was it was so easy to convert to Pinhole, because there's a little bezel on the front and a single meniscus lens. So all I had to do was unscrew it and take the lens out and put it in a little Pinhole disc in its place. And if I can present here now, I will try and show you one of the shots I took with this, a window. I suppose I want a window, do I? Try a window. That doesn't look right.
If you are presenting like from a website, window view is better, but if you're about to pop up an image from like a file browser, then do the full screen. Otherwise, it won't shift to the
okay. So it is sharing your entire screen, but I need to then bring up. Are you seeing that? Yes, you might be seeing that. Where's
no,
it
you gotta click the share entire screen, like click the screen and then click OK.
I clicked on share.
Yeah, so you clicked on share, but then in it, it'll say like application window or full screen. You still need to click the icon of the full screen to enable the full screen and then click OK.
I've got three choices: Chrome tab, window, or entire screen.
Just click where it says entire screen.
Yep.
And then click OK at the bottom of that window.
Oh, it says share.
Yep.
Okay. So, clicking share. Oh, click on the middle of it and then click share. Are you seeing that now?
No. Oh, yeah, here we go. Great.
Yeah, that's a handheld self-portrait taken with the Coral S. And I had some Delta 3200. I think I probably rated it at double speed. And it was a very, very bright day. And I just walked around with this, testing out the possibility of doing some handheld Pinhole. And it just worked out, so that was fine. But at some point, I was looking at a forum, and the suggestion came up of modifying the camera itself, not just modifying the lens or the Pinhole. So I took another of these folding cameras and closed up the front and bolted the shutter onto the front to reduce the focal length. Because one of the things about the Coral was that it was something like 85 millimeters focal length, but I wanted something much shorter. So I came up with this one, which is a Agfa record, the Viking, as you have it in the USA, and put the shutter straight onto the front. If you can see that there. And that proved quite handy because I'm going to share another one. And this time we should get it straight off. And this shot there is, yeah, it is actually a double exposure, but using color on this camera worked out pretty nicely. As a good pinhole of the right kind of width that seemed attractive enough. But then I moved on from that as well to take a similar AGFA, though this one was a 6x6, and use a reverse lens. And so the single element lens was in the shutter, bolted onto the body, but it gave a nice sharp center and total diffusion out towards the corners and the sides. But again, because it was fixed into one of the element discs, I could easily swap from the reverse lens element to the pinhole. And on the same camera, it was very quick and easy to swap them over. So this one was a pinhole taken on the same day. Well, after that, there's the camera there. After that, I figured that I'd been using a 6x7 roll film back. So I thought instead of using or modifying a camera, I would then just take the roll film back and build a camera on the front of it. And so that was the next thing to do. Take a roll film back like the RB67 and simply graft a body onto the front like this one here. Now, this was 6x7 and very easy to do, because if I open up the camera and take out the insert, you'll see that I've just used 2 brass strips onto the wood, holding the roll film holder in its natural grooves. They just go straight into the grooves there that it has at the sides. So it became very quick and easy to use a camera like this, and it was actually very straightforward to build. Now, I happen to like 6x7, but I've always had a passion about 6x6 as well, the square. So the next thing was really to do the same sort of thing, but at a 6x6. And because of the way of building this, I actually had to do it in layers. You can see the layers there in a sense, because I had to find a way of putting the hooks in to hold the back of the Hasselblad A12 or A24. And so I made a couple of these, and each of them had a slightly different thickness, different focal length, and they worked out okay, quite successfully. Just a little paint to decorate them. Now, I'd made a 6x7 and 6x6. I also did a 6x9 with a Graflex 2.3 back, and exactly the same sort of thing. It was just built to whatever seemed to be a reasonable focal length. I'm going to share a couple of the images that come out of those. And then just get the images up. Here's one of the 6x7, and there's another one here. And another one, this time in color. I don't often work in color, but every now and then. And then the 6x9, I think my laptop's probably working a bit slow. It's under stress today. What impressed me about these was actually the sharpness of them. They're very, very sharp negatives for a pinhole. There's a dinosaur park near us, and just raise that up a bit in size. You know, that would pass for a tolerably good lens, I think, but it is, of course, a pinhole on the 6x9 there.
Are you drilling your own pinholes, or are you buying them, or how you're doing the pinholes?
It used to be I did my own using brass sheet, and I got a lot of practice doing it. But in time, one of the things I found was that my eyesight was not as good, and it was getting harder and harder to do them accurately. I could certainly do 0.3 of a millimeter, no problem. But if I needed something smaller, it was going to be more efficient to buy them in. And that's what I started doing a few years ago, was buying in pinholes, either from Lithuania or from France. And they were all, you know, quite cheap, but they were excellent quality. So these days, yeah, I buy them in as one of the 6x6 ones. And I also ran some 35mm color through them as well. I've been spending time down at the local river, and so it was obvious to take one of the pinhole cameras down there, and this was done with some 35mm strip, and that seemed to work out okay. But of course, when I have a 6x6 and a 6x7 and a 6x9, it's probably pretty obvious that something's missing. So I had to think about, how can I find myself a 6x8? And I was able to do that because someone reminded me about the Fuji 6x8. And so the next thing was to think about how expensive they are. And so rather than buy a film back for a 6x8, I thought I would actually just buy the insert. Now, you might realize that these days, inserts are pretty cheap if they're the 220 variety, because nobody's shooting 220 film anymore. Nobody makes it. So I looked into how easy it would be to create a camera box working just from the insert instead of having the full.
Sandeha, you're still presenting, so we're not seeing the camera. So yeah, click the.
Sorry about that. I see that down there. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I went onto eBay to look for a 220 film insert for the Fuji 6x8, the GX68, I think it is. And I found one, and I think for £15, I got it including the shipping. So it was pretty cheap. But of course, the next thing was to consider that I had no winder and I had no counter. So I was going to have to work out how that was going to work out. So I put the box together, and I found a way of working the winder, which was kind of fortunate. It worked out pretty well. And I'll show you the drawings for that. Oh, it's very satisfying the way this one winds. I'll show you the drawings for this. Where are they gone? Here we are. I've always worked on the principle of designing and building in one process. But for once, I actually got the sketchbook out instead and started work with the sketchbook. But I was very fortunate with the winder, because it turned out that the gear from a Hasselblad back, because I had one that was broken, was a perfect mate for the little gear on the film back insert. And you notice all the grooves inside that gear there. Well, naturally enough, the spindle was easy to drill out the stop screw and then tap a new thread so that I could add on a little winder, 3mm, I think it was. And so that all fell into place. The only issue became light proofing, and I had to revise it once or twice by putting new baffles down here and on this side as well. But then once it was all blacked up, it worked out okay. And yeah, I started building this, I suppose it must have been 3 months ago, but it's only just in the last few days that I have been able to run another test on it and come to the end of that. So back to, here we are, some of the shots I've taken with it.
So I'm assuming you're using a red window and you're winding with 120 film.
I'm not using a red window because it would be buried at some depth in the, in fact, it would be impossible because of the nature of the film holder insert. It's not like a RADA back, you know. You don't really have access to the number on the paper. So what I'm doing is counting, and I've got it quite neat now. I think that I can count on 16 half turns to bring it to frame number 1, and then 4 turns and 4 turns, 3.5 turns and 3.5 turns to take it successively through. And on a good day, I should get 8 shots out of that with very clear spacing. And, you know, working with 6x8 instead of 6x7, it's not a huge difference, but it's just one more in the arsenal for taking shots. Go away, you. And then this last roll, which I just did the other day in very, very poor weather, showed one of the assets of this particular camera. This is a little memorial shrine to the mining community where some miners happened to die a few years ago. So it's quite modern. But of course, that is a wheel. It's a full circle. But because the pinhole was that close to it, it has been stretched out and elongated. But in other respects, the new film I just discovered in this camera certainly seemed to work out pretty well. And here's another shot with it, and another shot here. And I think that's the last one that I've prepared here. But yeah, this was a bought pinhole disc. I think it was 0.25 of a millimeter, and the focal length of this camera is 45 millimeters. Yeah, back to the sketch again. So stop sharing there, and that should bring us back as soon as that goes down. Yeah. So that is the latest in the development of roll film back pinhole cameras.
That's great. It makes me think of, it's not my turn to present, and I might not even get to it today, but Heather actually introduced me to her friend and now my friend Becky in Albuquerque, who is a big pinholer and kind of like an inspiration to me. One day, Becky asked if I could just make her a flange for an RB67 back because I had one on the homunculus, and so it was just a matter of slicing the file, and I made the flange, and I gave it to her, and I said, "Hey Becky, what are you making with this?" And she said, "Oh, like a 45 millimeter pinhole." And I said, like, "Okay, Becky, I'm going to knock you off here. I've already made the flange. I'll make the box." And basically, I'm really impressed. Like, your camera is far more beautiful in wood. I really like the one that's sort of like gray and yellow with all of the studs on the front. I think that's an amazing object. But I kind of made this guy, which is
oh, beautiful.
It's about the same idea, right? Which is, it's just a 3D printed black box, but it takes these what do you say, Mamiya RB67 backs. It's got a piece of a tin can in there, and locks on. I did not go so far as to make a shutter like yours. I just put my finger here and pull this out and do that. Yeah, I think it's kind of neat that a bunch of us are making kind of the same cameras in an infinite number of different ways.
I think one thing is clear is that what you're working with is the tools of the future. The 3D printing, you'd be able to do it on Mars if you got the opportunity to get there. I worked with wood and brass because that's what I've always done. And yeah, I've always had a liking for working with brass, and wood, well, whenever necessary, I'll work with wood. And so I quite literally missed out on that next step that you're engaged in now.
I missed out on the middle step.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think it's fun. Like, one of my favorite parts of your work is just like the drawings you made. And I've been working very hard of late to try and get good at drawing. Like, it all starts in the same place.
It does. As I said, traditionally for this kind of stuff, I've always done the design in 3 dimensions, and I can do that with wood. You can't do that when you're feeding your, what's the expression? Your 3D printing spider. It's a spider's web, isn't it? Robotic spider. So you can't really do that. You've got to do the plans, you've got to do the designs, you've got to do the math before you do anything else.
Does anybody have any questions for Sandeha?
Yeah, so I like what you've been doing with the progression. I think there's a clear amount of refinement that I see as you work your way through the various cameras. I'm just curious, we're seeing the camera that you're basically building right now, just finishing tuning, refining. What do you plan on doing next? What's the next step?
To be honest, I've been using up materials, and so my stock of timber and brass is pretty much all gone, and so I've got no plans to make any more cameras at all.
To be fair, that's what you said months ago, and you've put out like 3 or 4 cameras in the meantime.
I know. I was just going to say that Ethan asked me the same question months ago, and it was true. But it was only after that point I realized I didn't have a 6x8. So once that realization came in, of course, that became the next camera. But I'm not going to say to myself, "Oh, I haven't got a 6x12." I've got enough cameras to shoot now. I really need to get up and shoot them.
So would you say that, like, for you, the end goal is to shoot? Because I know for some of us, building the camera is the fun part, and I think for some of us, taking the photos is the fun part. Which would you say for you is more true?
For the last 15 years, I've been building, and I've passed up lots of opportunities to go out and shoot because I felt, I want to spend more time in the workshop. I think that phase is over now. And I think now it's much more a case of using the sunshine, using the light, and having some choice in what I shoot with. Because apart from Pinhole, I got a rack of other cameras, and they all need use. They all need using.
So it's time to spend all your money on film, I take it.
Yeah, it'll be filmed now. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, incidentally, I've got this little packet here. Some of you might know of Fomapan, which is made in the Czech Republic. It's a very cheap film compared with the Ilford and the Kodak. It's about half the price. But the funny thing is, I'd never seen this particular version before. They call it Foma Creative, but they've got this special fancy packet for it. And I bought a couple of these the other day, and it is superb. I absolutely love it. So I'll be buying more of this. Now, that's the advertising done, but I don't get anything for that. But
Hey.
I was impressed. I was really impressed with the film.
Sandeha, maybe now is a good time. Where can people find you on the internet? You're kind of all over.
I am.
Kind of a big deal.
I'm gonna put up a little screen, because I think it was Brian who had one earlier, and I thought that's a good idea. So present again.
Yeah, you can tell that Brian is a teacher, and
it's all down to knowing how to spell my name. I think that's the thing. So can you see that now? Can you see the notepad?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, if you can spell my name, you can find me, because I'm on Instagram and on Flickr. And my website is sandehalynch.com. And I've put up one particular link to a page, because that goes through all the history of camera making that I've been involved with over the last 15 years. And that's the camaraderie page. So I'm probably quite easy to find with a unique name, because even if you spell it wrong, Google might point you in the right direction.
And if you are watching on YouTube from home after the fact, there is an excellent episode with a bunch of our guests, but there's an excellent episode where we basically go through all of the camaraderie gallery from Sandeha on the Homemade Camera podcast. We'll put the link in the description.
Absolutely.
And of course, the links will be in the show notes for this episode as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Good.